Yes, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
good
Yes, you
evening.
may start.
So, good evening, everyone, and it is indeed my great pleasure to welcome you all. And I really appreciate you all being showing a keen interest in the clinical medicine in spite of living a very interesting cricket match. And I think with all our wishes with them, probably they will do well. But this is a very interesting talk as well. And I thank Dr. Indu for taking this initiative. At the outset, I appreciate Dr. Rawat's efforts, sir, because he was the one who introduced this program in the last year. Though initially it was done in the morning activity, it was appreciated widely at that time also. And now we have decided to continue it as a regular monthly activity from this month onwards. And as I had already texted to everyone in the group, this will be conducted on first Thursday of every month at 9 p.m. So I think we have an excellent team. This time, I think Dr. Indu is presenting a case from SRCC. Before we start with the formal case presentation, I would request Dr. Rawat to just say a few words, and then thereafter Dr. Indu to give the covering comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joshi, for taking up this program as an IPNRC program, because this is really a very excellent teaching where we have got Dr. Sonal, Dr. Hiren, and Dr. Indu, and all the young brigade in form of Tanvi and Avenya. They are doing excellent work, and the amount of teaching which we get, it is really fabulous. So let us hope that we can continue it every month, and we give a very excellent learning to all the delegates who join as at 9 o'clock. So straight away over to Dr. Indu to please start the program, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rawat, Dr. Jayan Joshi, for this opportunity. This time, the case that we have, and I'm very happy that now this is on the National Respiratory Chapter platform, so that we can circulate it, and we will all learn from variety of cases which will come from pan India. So this time, though it's a similar pulmonary radio crosstalk, where we have been doing clinical correlation with radiology findings, learning from our radiology colleagues, but this time we have tried to move out a little out of the lung, and we have reached the airway. And so for this special session, we are going to discuss, I would say it's an airway pulmonary radiology ENT crosstalk this time, and we have our ENT teams who are also going to teach us help us manage a really challenging case. And managing this case has been a very good learning experience for all of us. This child is still admitted with us, and I think I will hand it over to Tanvi to present the case and showcase the challenges that we faced. And I think it's going to be a learning experience at every step. Over to you, Tanvi.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Rawat sir, Jayan Joshi sir, for the opportunity to present this for the first time on the NRC, as part of the IIP NRC also, and taking it to a national platform. Thank you, ma'am, Sonal ma'am, Hiren sir, for the opportunity. Permission to share my slides. So I would like to begin by introducing myself. I'm a second-year pediatric pulmonology fellow at Narayana Health SRCC Children's Hospital, Mumbai, and my guidance mentor is Dr. Indu Khosla, ma'am. Today's case is slightly beyond just the lungs, as ma'am said. It is Strider and looking at the bigger picture. I would like to begin with the history. It's a 4-month-old female child born of third-degree consanguineous.
Dr. Tanvi, can you make it full screen?
Slideshow.
Yes,
It's not
sir.
slideshow.
Just go on slideshow.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
So, it's a history of a 4-month-old female child born of third-degree consanguineous marriage. She was a resident of Oman and third by birth order. She came with complaints of noisy breathing since 2 weeks of age. It typically subsided when she was sleeping on her side, but it did not subside in sleep. Her birth history is not significant. Her birth history is significant. She was full-term, normal vaginal delivery. Her mother had polyhydramnios and she was low birth weight, 2.1 kg and 49 centimeters. She had a weak cry after birth. She had history of some neonatal jaundice, an ICU stay for 7 days, though she did not require any oxygen or ventilatory support. She was on mixed feeding. Mother gives history that there was a difficulty in feeding. Mother described it like a suck cycle. She also had excessive irritability, occasional regurgitation, but nothing severely distressing as per the history. And this was a noisy breathing which started only at 2 weeks of life, which was told to be normal when they visited their pediatrician because it subsided on a lateral position and it was not constant. So the timeline went like this. The feeding difficulty, suck rest suck persisted. The noisy breathing was noticed to have increased over 2 weeks, 1 month to 3 months, and each time it was told to be normal. Finally, when they presented to a hospital over there, she presented with bluish discoloration following an episode of crying, noisy breathing, and uprolling of eyeballs, and that was finally when she was hospitalized. At that point of time, her records
Tanvi,
show that.
can can I ask
Yes, sir.
one question?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the noisy breathing.
Yes, sir.
So that noisy breathing was more during
Sorry, sir.
Hiren, you're not audible.
inspiration or
Hiren, I think your internet is patchy, Hiren. We can't hear you. Tanvi, I think what Dr. Hiren wants to ask you was the noisy breathing in inspiration, expiration, how was it? That's what he was trying to ask you.
expiration? Was there anything?
So,
I mean, the sound was more towards the expiration right now, or the voice is muffled. Yeah, that's what I would ask. Yeah.
on history, she just said it was a noisy breathing throughout. It was more when he was crying. It was a little less when they put him to sleep on the side. But she said it was even there in sleep. And when we saw it, when the child finally presented to us, which I'm coming to later on, it was a biphasic stridor.
Yeah. So why I asked that question, because radiologically, when you have more expiratory stridor, that means that the level of obstruction would be more lower down. And
Interthoracic.
and when you have inspiratory stridor, then the cause will be upper airways. That's why I was trying to.
Yeah. So actually, in this child, the breathing what they described was not like a typical stridor.
Typical stridor.
That is why. Typically, as you rightly said, above the vocal cords would be inspiratory, at the level of cords or at just below the cords would be biphasic, and below would be expiratory. But what the parent could not really tell us very clearly whether it was inspiratory, expiratory, and it was increasing in intensity. It started very early on in Leo, and it was more of noise in the chest, which the mother was talking about.
Okay.
So this is what the history was there till now. Till one day it increased in intensity. Probably the child had a cold at that time also. The mother couldn't give a clear history, but she noticed the bluish discoloration. She noticed the lethargy, and there was uprolling of eyeballs when they were finally taken to the ER. When she was admitted, she was lethargic. There was refusal to feed for the day before that. She was cyanosed on admission. There was gasping respiration, and she was intubated on arrival. It is also documented in the records that it was a difficult intubation, and it took 4 attempts, and finally was intubated with an uncuffed size 3 tube. There, the child was treated as an LRTI or bronchiolitis as their working diagnosis.
If I ask you to now, when you are getting this history and your intubation was difficult, does it give you any thought process here?
Ma'am, difficult intubation, we will see right from the upper airway. The first thing we will look at is a subglottic stenosis is one thing if we have to look at the cords. So supraglottic, subglottic stenosis, or then a tracheal stenosis. A malacia would be more malleable if it is a weakness only, but we are looking at either a subglottic stenosis or maybe a lower down tracheostenosis because they've said difficult intubation.
Yeah, Dr. Anju is there.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Anju, what would you think in such as an ENT surgeon, if we have a difficulty in intubation, what should our residents or everybody think of at this stage?
Yeah, so first thing, when we examine such a child clinically, we would try to auscultate on the neck. We have been trained to auscultate on the chest like all others, but starting from the upper airway point of view, we would auscultate on the neck. we would typically hear what we in our airway terms we call as a washing machine sound, which this child had, which is like water bubbling through a full airway. So it is not really a kind of stridor. It's a noisy breathing, but we would call it washing machine sound. Second, if we get a child where they find it difficult to intubate in the first few months of life, then our probable diagnosis first would be a congenital subglottic stenosis, which is the second most common cause of noisy breathing in neonatal period. First being laryngomalacia, second being congenital subglottic stenosis, and second is bilateral abductor palsy, and then subglottic stenosis. So the other two, as Tanvi described, they would not complain. That symptom would not be like difficulty in passing the tube below the vocal cord. It will be suggestive of subglottis. So here they should have actually mentioned in their notes that at what level did they find it difficult? Was it difficult to visualize the vocal cords, or was it difficult to pass the vocal cord below? And at what level did they find the block? So that is important when we go through the notes which we get from outside patients.
What about a laryngeal web? Can that also come like this?
So congenital laryngeal webs typically will present with the dysphonia if they are larger webs which involve more of the length of the. So there are type 4 webs. One is when it involves only the anterior 35% of the vocal cord. Type 2 is up to 50%. Type 3 is up to 75%, and then beyond. So they will first present with aphonia or a absent cry or very weak cry. So this was not the history given in this case. So we'll not think of webs here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. That was quite helpful.
Thank you, ma'am. So, beyond this, while they knew that the parents were told there was some airway problem, and otherwise the child was treated as an LRTI or a bronchiolitis, started on antibiotics, and was ventilated. So multidisciplinary management was underway over here also, where they involved the ENT, pulmonology, along with that, the cardiology and radiology team. A 2D echo and a CT with contrast were also done, and I will reveal that at a later stage.
My task panel doesn't work now. How do I make the Zoom full screen? How do I make the Zoom?
Sonal, you'll have to mute yourself. Okay.
So again, going back to the levels of obstruction, as Dr. Hiren sir also elaborated on, Dr. Anju ma'am also elaborated on, based on the level of obstruction, these are the different sounds, different clues that we get. If it's a nasopharyngeal obstruction, then typically we can suspect choanal atresia, which presents with a cyanosis, which is usually relieved by crying or distress. We can check that commonly by trying to pass an NG tube. Then supraglottic, like laryngomalacia, epiglottitis, laryngeal webs, will have an inspiratory stridor. Glottic, like vocal cord palsies, will have weak cry, hoarseness. A subglottic stenosis screw will have biphasic stridors, may also be accompanied by a barking type of cough. An extrathoracic tracheal obstruction, like a congenital tracheal stenosis, could also have a biphasic stridor, also like a washing machine sound, as ma'am said. A tracheal or an intrathoracic one may be due to a pulmonary vascular sling, a vascular ring, or a mediastinal mass compressing, could have an expiratory stridor or a fixed wheeze, and of course, wheezing with respiratory distress at a lower airway or a bronchial level. Now, a twist in the tale was further down while the child was admitted there before he came to us at around day of admission 28. The child developed a generalized maculopapular rash all over the body. There was no sparing. It was over the trunk, the face, perianal areas, the limbs. They suspected a viral exanthem or an autoimmune or cutis marmorata or eczema. These were therefore differentials before they referred to us. Started on moisturizers, antihistaminics, and warming. A respiratory panel was sent which showed parainfluenza. A blood culture was repeated which showed MRSA. Antibiotics were changed to peptaz and vancomycin, and a repeat blood culture was no growth. At this stage, the child was unable to be weaned off oxygen support, even though he was brought down to NIV and was referred to our hospital for further investigation and management. When the child presented to us, The heart rate was about 130, respiratory rate was 40 per minute. There were suprasternal retractions, there was noisy breathing, which we also later found out the terminology of a washing machine sound as ma'am described. It was a biphasic stridor somewhere, which was noisy breathing, not exactly a stridor, but it was just noisy breathing. The child was maintaining a saturation of 96% on triple HFNC when they came to us, but eventually required non-invasive ventilation on admission. The length, weight, and head circumference centiles are mentioned, and there was some failure to thrive, with the weight Z score being minus 4.92. The rash was maculopapular, generalized, and there was some skin peeling, and it was in the resolving stage, as the parents said that it had decreased as compared to what it was before. Our dermatology opinion was taken, which was told that it could be a drug reaction because it was about 3 weeks after cephalosporins, even though the child was too young. They also suspected congenital lupus or again cutis marmorata or telangiectasia cutis. From this was the chest x-ray on admission. We don't have access to the x-rays from the previous hospital, so this was the first chest x-ray that we were seeing. I request Dr. Sonal ma'am if you can help in.
Yeah. So what we can see on this chest X-ray firstly is that the heart shadow is a bit abnormal. You don't see the typical left ventricle jutting out. So this gives you the feeling that this could be some sort of mesocardia or dextrocardia or something. Of course, the X-ray is a bit rotated, as we can all see. The clavicles are not equidistant from the midline. Yes, there's also some amount of hyperinflation, but at the same time, there is a lot of ground glass opacity seen in both the lung fields. They are not clear, even though they are hyperinflated. So again, it gives you the feeling that there might be some airway disorder. Now, one very important thing that I want to point out is if you can see the midline, the trachea. So the tracheal shadow typically, so you can see at around C5, C6 level, there is a good tracheal lumen. But then as we go further down, D1, D2, D3, D4, you can see that there is a diffuse luminal narrowing. Now, this is highly abnormal because the tracheal lumen should stay the same or it should widen. But here you can see that there's narrowing, and even the right and left mainstem bronchus are not well seen. So, given this history of noisy breathing and difficulty in, breathlessness and things like that, I would definitely suspect some disorder here, which will need further evaluation.
Yeah. So,
And
and one more
probably
thing that, yeah, the bilateral lungs are hyperinflated, which indicates that it should be a central pathology which is giving rise to both lungs being hyperinflated. So that also indicates that some central problem, central airways, rather than focal unilateral problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
Ma'am, anything else that anyone would like to add in this?
no, I think let's
Otherwise-
proceed. This case is long,
Yes, ma'am.
but this was the extra findings in a nutshell. Yeah.
So, with this finding and based on whatever reports, yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Rawat has commented that he felt there was hyperinflation and the heart was globular and the pedicle was narrow.
Yeah, the pedicle, yes, the pedicle appears narrow, and also for this baby, there's one more shadow that is missing, and that is the thymic shadow. So you should see the thymic sale sign in such small babies, but here you are not able to see that.
Oh,
So
that
that is
was-
another
So here
important.
we got the hints of the trachea being narrow, the mesocardia, and a narrow pedicle.
And the vascular markings also appears more prominent in the central part. So that also indicates there is some sort of peribronchovascular, maybe some aspiration in the past, which had happened in the both sides.
There was some history of reflux in the past also.
Correct.
So moving on, we did a bronchoscopy, and I'm going to highlight the findings. We have the images of the vocal cord also coming up next, but I'm highlighting the trachea. What we can see as we tried to maneuver, as Sonal ma'am could see from the X-ray also, that beyond the D4, D5 level, there is a significant narrowing, there is stenosis, and there are complete tracheal rings that were seen in the distal part of the trachea. There were 5 complete tracheal rings that we counted in the distal part. On the right, we removed a mucus plug from the right middle lobe. And on the left side also there was bronchomalacia. I will just play the next.
Actually, there was bronchomalacia at
Yes, ma'am.
at the right main stem
I'll
and
just
as
put
well
that
as the
one.
left main stem. Can you just go back?
Yes, ma'am. I'll just go back and
So there was complete tracheal rings in the last.
sorry, ma'am. I'll just play it again.
Yeah, just as a curious thing,
Very
can you
difficult
show that?
for us.
Can you show that how that complete tracheal ring looks like on this?
Yes,
Can you point out?
Yeah,
yes.
and it was in fact very difficult to maneuver into the lung after you pause it there if you when you reach there.
Yes, ma'am.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that was the correct place. So
So here we can see.
the whole thing was and it is narrowed compared to the.
So this entire thing has got significantly narrow once we were maneuvering inside.
Okay. So this bronchoscopy was there before CT scan, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Upper airway was fine.
So as we go further down, we can see it getting significantly narrower. We had removed a mucus plug from the right middle, and on the left side, we got significant bronchomalacia more than the right. Especially the upper and the lingular lobe were significantly malacic. We're going into the left lobe now. There was bronchomalacia here. There was significant bronchomalacia over here with the lingular lobe and the upper lobe. Even lower lobe was malacic. We were using a small 2.8 scope, but we could not go beyond the bronchus intermedius on the right side, and we couldn't go into the lower lobe bronchi on the left side either. We could not see the segmental bronchi in the lower lobe beyond this point. There was no subglottic stenosis that we could see. These are better images of the same. So here we can see the complete tracheal rings pretty clearly. We can see the significant narrowing, and this lowest picture we can see the bronchomalacia, especially in the left side, more than the right. Anju ma'am, if you would have anything to add at this point of time.
Yeah. So normally we divide the trachea into 6 parts. If we form a C anteriorly, this is cartilaginous and the posterior part is membranous. So if we divide it into 6 parts, this membranous part is only one part. 5 parts are made by the cartilaginous part. What happens in congenital tracheal rings is the whole of the trachea is in the form of a complete tracheal ring. There is no membranous part. So which reduces the mobility or the elasticity of the whole segment. And as it goes down, the canalization happens like this, that the complete tracheal rings are a little wider in the proximal part. As they go down distally towards the carina, it becomes more narrower, which is seen in this video as well. And another point is there's a Bernoulli phenomenon happening anywhere when there is a fixed obstruction in the airway. The distal part will start collapsing. That is Bernoulli principle. So here, if the tracheal rings are complete and there is a narrowing, the bronchomalacia will be exaggerated as is seen in this case.
Thank you, ma'am. So that explains the noisy breathing that we were able to see. It explained the narrowing that we could see on the X-ray also that Sonal ma'am highlighted. So now I request Sonal ma'am if you could just share we went forward to do a CTPA, mostly a CTPA also because the pulmonary vascular slings are the most common associated anomaly with this. 2D echo was also done. The management was happening simultaneously, though I will show it sequentially. So 2D echo was also done with the mesocardia, which also showed a large ASD. I request Sonal ma'am to please share the DICOM images.
I'll share it.
Yes, ma'am, if you...
Yeah. Can see my screen, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now in this child, because we are suspecting an airway disorder, what we tend to do is we tend to do a CT scan which covers all the way from the nose down, because you want to see the entire airway, including the upper airway. So here we see, as we scroll down, you can see the nose, you can see the upper nasopharynx. As we go further down, okay, so you can see that the lumen of the nasopharynx is fairly even. So if you continue to focus on the central round, where you can see that there is the tube, the gastric tube passing by. So now we've come to the level of the larynx with the vocal cords, and everything still looks fine. Now we have come to the level of the trachea. And as we are going down, if you can see the two round dots, that is the trachea on the front and the esophagus at the back. So as we continue to scroll down, now we can start seeing that the trachea is now narrowing. Instead of remaining the same, it is now narrowing in diameter. Okay, it continues to be narrow. And now at the level of the carina, you can actually see that it has almost become like a flat tube. So instead of being a nice round, it has become a flat tube. Okay, so this is the lung window, and you can see how, I will just window it a bit so you can appreciate. Okay, so now the black, you can see how flat and collapsed it is. Okay, so that is the level of the carina. Now going back to the so this is the bifurcation, and here we see the right and the left mainstem bronchi, which are also diffusely narrow. In fact, the left mainstem bronchus is very narrow, and that is why you are seeing, as Dr. Anju said, the Bernoulli phenomenon, and you can see that there will be air trapping in the lungs because the bronchi are flappy and they are collapsing intermittently. Now, the normal right bronchus divides into the right upper lobe, a bronchus intermedius, followed by right middle and lower. So here we are not seeing that right upper lobe bronchus originating. And in fact, it goes directly into the bronchus intermedius, which then divides into the middle and the lower lobe bronchus. What we can also see is that, contrary to the chest x-ray, you can actually see that there is a discrepancy in the lung volume between the right and left side. You can see that the right lung volume is much smaller. So in this setting where you do not see one bronchus, we are not seeing the right upper lobe bronchus, we assume that there is a lobar atresia or a partial atresia of the right lung, which again is part of a spectrum of the airway and lung anomalies. Now on the left side, again, you can see that there is a very bad narrowing of the left mainstem bronchus. It is a diffuse narrowing. And now again, you can start seeing the left lower lobe bronchus. So basically, there is a multifocal narrowing of the distal trachea, the carina, and both the mainstem bronchi as well as the segmental bronchi. Now, as we saw, I've windowed it a little too much, but as we saw the lung window, you can see these patchy areas of air trapping, or patchy areas of hyperinflation rather. Okay, here you can see the typical mosaic attenuation of the lungs, where you have areas of ground glass density interspersed. So it is white interspersed with black. So that is a typical mosaic attenuation, which you either see in an airway disorder or you see it in a vascular disorder. So in this, clearly it can be attributed to the airway disorder. Now I will go to the mediastinum and discuss the findings that we saw in the mediastinum.
Yeah, just before
Okay.
that, a few words. Look, learning from my mistake only that when you are assessing the airway, just always see in the lung window only. When you are looking at the mediastinum window, as now Dr. Sonal is scrolling down, the trachea lumen might look slightly bigger than what you see in the lung window. So this kind of mistake I've made in past, and I've got a feedback from our cardiac team and the NSA team that what you shown
And also
not
this,
that picture to
sorry.
the accurate findings. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hiren, is it
Yeah.
possible to know the number of complete tracheal rings on the CT scan?
Sir, that part is difficult. No. We can see that it's probably looking like more of a complete cartilaginous ring by looking at the circular diameter of the trachea and narrow in caliber. But it is difficult to count that how many rings of the trachea is completely cartilaginous. That is very difficult, especially when the child, the tracheobronchial tree is very immature, so we cannot differentiate the cartilage versus the soft tissue part. So for us, it's very difficult to say that how many complete rings are there. It may be possible in adult airway, but not in the pediatric population.
Can we know the length of the stenosis?
Length
Yeah,
we can
Looking
so
at the scan.
Yeah, length we can show. That Dr. Sonal
Yeah.
will show right now.
Yeah. So that I'll show. So just and another point I just wanted to add is that this same patient had a previous CT scan in which there was an endotracheal tube in situ. So that is another situation in which it becomes difficult to assess the airway, because when the tube is in situ, the airway will look, fallaciously distended. So in this scan, there was no endotracheal tube in situ, and that is why we were able to get the accurate estimation of the diameters and the length of narrowing, etc. Now, just going to the mediastinal window. So, as we saw in the X-ray, that the heart has an abnormal shape and position. It has a dextro position rather than a dextrocardia. So here you can see this is the midline. Both the ventricles are pointing in the midline. So that is mesocardia. The normal is levocardia when both the ventricles point towards the left. Dextrocardia is when they point towards the right. So here they are pointing in the midline, and that is called mesocardia. And this abnormal rightward position of the heart is called dextro position. So this is a dextroposed or a dextro, the heart's position is dextro position, and that is because that right upper lobe is absent. So there is a lesser lung volume on the right side, because of which the heart has slightly shifted to the right. So there's dextro position and mesocardia. Briefly, I will tell you, there is this large ASD between the two ventricles. I can just point that out. So this is the ASD. So there's a large ASD, and there was just one more variant, which was a bovine arch branching pattern, as well as a double SVC. So these are all just anatomical variations, but intracardiac abnormality, the only intracardiac abnormality she had was this large ASD. So, and another thing is, as we saw in the chest X-ray here, we can also see here that the thymic shadow is actually nearly completely absent. I mean, I'm not sure if somebody would like to consider this as a very small thymus, but I was very doubtful whether this is a thymus or not. The last finding was that her, as we scrolled down into the abdomen, you can see here the right kidney, but the left kidney was apparently absent on the CT scan, but later on an ultrasound, we confirmed it to be ectopic in location. So this conglomerate of findings of an airway disorder, a cardiac anomaly in the form of ASD, absence of the right upper lobe, non-visualization of the thymus, ectopic kidney, gave a clue to some particular disease. Can someone tell us that? Anybody in the chat box?
No. That we can ask Tanvi to take it over. She has
Okay.
This was a very
So
valuable
just to answer Dr. Easy's question, sir, if you can see my MIP image on the right hand side of the coronal, actually the what we saw on CT scan was a very long segment narrowing of the distal trachea. So from right from D2 D3 level onwards, there was a diffuse narrowing of the trachea all the way up to the carina, and then we can see this diffuse narrowing of the right mainstem bronchus as well as the middle and lower lobe bronchi. And the same thing on the left side. Here you can see the left mainstem bronchus is actually very severely narrow. So it was a long segment narrowing. Yeah. Tanvi, I'm done with the CT scan. It's 9:37, so that's why I think I should stop with the
Yes.
CT. We have a lot of discussion and all
But
that.
actually, that was very valuable. And while we were reading more and more, I also came across an investigation called the tracheobronchogram, I think, which was done earlier before we had the advent of a virtual bronchoscopy, which could do reconstruction from CT images. So, ma'am, if you could just give a couple of words of what that is and why it's not done anymore, ma'am, also.
Which one?
The tracheobronchogram, which was done
Like
initially
Yes,
in
so
old
that-
virtual
papers.
CT scan.
So
Before
what
the
she's
advent
asking,
of virtual.
yeah. So in the past, before the technology,
Hiren, your internet is very bad. We can't.
people used to do like kind of cat angio that where they
Air bronch, like
you can't hear me now. Now it's better. Now
Yeah,
it's better or not? Hello.
now it's better.
So what I'm saying, what I'm saying that in the past, like what we used to do cath angio, no, that kind of that we are injecting a contrast into the vessel and we are seeing the coronary and the cardiac chambers. Similar way, what they were doing that they were directly instilling the contrast to the way, like in the trachea and the bronchi, and that's how they used to see that the area of narrowing is how many centimeter long the opening by giving some sort of pressure. So whether we are dealing with some sort of malacia or stenosis, those kind of questions were being solved by this crude method, in which directly you are intubating a child and through that endotracheal tube you are injecting a dye within the tracheobronchial tree, which accordingly according to me it's like very crude method because you are directly injecting some contrast agent which can be creating a chemical pneumonia in the lung. It's highly possible and it is like irritating to the mucosa. So that's why over the years, after the advent of this all newer technology in CT scan, it has replaced that conventional tracheobronchogram. And with this technology, when we take the image in the inspiration or expiration, we are able to solve most of the doubt that we have. Very still level of anatomical obstruction, how much is the length of the segment, and how much severity of stenosis. All this information is being dealt with the CT scan itself only, which is like non-invasive as compared to what we were following previously in the tracheobronchogram. Yeah, I hope that
Thank you,
answers
sir.
the question.
Thank you,
Yeah,
ma'am.
correct.
That was a doubt because that is still there in literature and the old papers for anyone who reads it. So that was one extra learning point. So these are just summarizing the findings of the CT.
I
Yes, ma'am.
just wanted to show one thing, like since Dr. Easy was asking.
Yes, ma'am.
So, sir, if you can see, like here we have measured the tracheal lumen. So you can see the, sorry. So the luminal diameter. So at the trachea and the subglottic level, it was 7.2. Then the upper one third was 5.2. The middle and lower one third and the supracarinal region, they were all less than 5 millimeters. So there was like a long segment narrowing. And even both the mainstem bronchi were diffusely narrow. They were less than 3 millimeters. So there was narrowing even in these. So yeah.
Just a lateral thought, these measurements come handy when you ever consider a stenting a child. So whenever we have to do a stenting, these kind of, and the smallest stent that is currently available is 4 millimeters, which I found out for another patient. So when these really come handy then when you ever have to stent a child.
Yeah. So non-visualization of thymus, then the narrow pedicle that we discussed on the X-ray, these were very important clues for us to again think of the bigger picture, that it's not just one anomaly. Whenever, as all our teachers say, we find one, look for others. We got the ectopic kidney, we got the ASD, we had the double SVC, there was a left side, the normal aortic arch, there was no pulmonary vascular sling as we expected. But whenever we see thymic hyperplasia, we of course evaluate further. We looked for lymphopenia on serial CBCs, what I have highlighted. We also found some lymphopenia even though we did not have neutropenia. And answering Sonal ma'am's question, the syndrome that we are looking for is DiGeorge syndrome or 22q deletion, because it's all midline anomalies that we have seen so far. Another differential that we also kept in mind because of the renal anomaly and cardiac, though the tracheal stenosis is not classical, was Vactal, which is also what we ruled out. But certain features were not fitting classically, and tracheal stenosis was seen more in an atypical phenotype of DiGeorge, one of the many, which was also called Omenn syndrome. So we kept that in mind. Regarding the dermatology reference, where we were advised to rule out congenital lupus, looking at that extensive rash, so anti-SSA and SSB antibodies were negative. But that dermatitis, again, looking retrospectively at the absent thymus, it also supported our diagnosis of Omenn syndrome, which was a phenotype of thymic hypoplasia, lymphopenia, erythroderma, and hyper IgE, along with SCID like phenotypes. The cultures were negative from the BAL, what we sent. We can see progressively rising PCO2. That is the main reason for highlighting the ABGs over here, secondary to the airway obstruction. 2D echo had a large OS-ASD as ma'am has shown, mesocardia, the bilateral SVC. There was pulmonary hypertension, which was managed, and a dilated RA and RV, and the USG abdomen findings as ma'am has shared already. So the DDs at this point of time were DiGeorge, atypical DiGeorge, Vactal, and Down syndrome is the most commonly associated with tracheal stenosis, but it was not suspected in this child because none of the other phenotypical features matched. Going by DiGeorge, just quickly summing up all the syndromes which could be associated with airway anomalies. Most commonly, as I said, is a pulmonary vascular sling. It could be seen with up to 60% of tracheal anomalies, tracheal stenosis, especially long segment, and it's commonly called the ring sling complex. Then DiGeorge syndrome or 22q11.2 deletion, which has stenosis, laryngomalacia, also be associated with a typical catch-22 mnemonic. Down syndrome, all the craniosynostosis like Pfeiffer, Cruzon, Appert. We also have a child with Cruzon and a complete tracheal sleeve. CHARD syndrome, though it is again more commonly associated with tracheoesophageal fistula. Corneal atresia was not seen. Ophthalmology examination was normal. Vactral, we couldn't find any vertebral or limb anomalies in this child. And tracheal stenosis is less commonly associated with Vactral. It is, of course, most commonly a tracheoesophageal fistula that we see. Trisomy 18 and 13 are just for the sake of completion of the list. Now, to rule out our suspicion of Omenn syndrome, we did an extended LSSA. It did show absolute lymphopenia with some decrease of CD4, CD positive lymphocytes, including naive cells. The immunoglobulin panel which was sent, we would have expected a low IgA, IgG level also, and an elevated IgE. We got an IgE elevated, but the other immunoglobulins were within the normal range. Another typical features of Omenn syndrome that should have been there but were not were lymphadenopathy, which constitutes one of the triad, and hepatosplenomegaly. These children are also known to have repeat episodes of diarrhea and significant failure to thrive. The parents did not give any such history of chronic diarrhea, repeated loose stools over there, though we did get failure to thrive in this child. During the course, we sent genetics and a chromosomal microarray at this point of time to confirm our suspicions, and the report was awaited. As ma'am said, the child is still admitted in our hospital, She had repeated episodes of desaturation and bradycardia while on non-invasive ventilation and needed to be intubated. Even though the child was intubated, she also had multiple similar episodes. A tracheostomy was attempted but could not be done at that point of time. We gave injectable steroids, waited 1 week for airway edema to subside, and reattempted a tracheostomy, after which an uncuffed size 4 tube could be placed. Dr. Anju ma'am, Dr. Ezi sir, could you highlight the difficulties that you all encountered while trying to insert the tracheostomy tube in this case of tracheal stenosis, ma'am?
So, so when we got this child, to the OT for a tracheostomy, uh, the child had a 3.5 tube, endotracheal tube, which was sitting at the mark 10 at the lip. It couldn't be pushed beyond. And even at that level, they were finding it difficult to ventilate the child. We, whenever the endotracheal tube would be pulled out, it was easy for them to ventilate because the tip of the tube kept on hitting the uppermost ring, which was narrow. When we attempted the tracheostomy, we did it at a midline incision. We exposed the trachea. When we tried to pass a regular uh, 3.5, which this we thought that because the endotracheal tube is going there, we found that the 3.5 couldn't be negotiated. There was some edema which is already developed at the upper end of the narrowest ring, so we couldn't negotiate it. Ultimately, what we had to do, we had, instead of using a tracheostomy tube, we had to take an endotracheal tube size 3, which was quite narrow, quite small, and we had to pass an endotracheal tube through that segment. And then the anesthetist could ventilate through that 3.0 tube, which is very small for this child. But at that point, because he was undergoing multiple episodes of desaturation, we had no choice but to put an endotracheal tube through the tracheostoma and maintain the child. Uh, During the post tracheostomy phase where the endotracheal tube was in situ, the first few days were okay, but as the tube was quite narrow, there was slowly building up of CO2. The peak pressures were rising, and eventually it was decided that we will have to shift over to a larger size tube to maintain this airway. We tried to get a customized long length tracheostomy tube, but which is not available in India. So we had no choice but to take him to the OT again, remove the endotracheal tube, pass in an endoscope through the stoma, go down and see the lower segment. We took some measurements, how much is the length from the stoma up to the narrow ring, proximal narrow ring. We tried to cut the tracheostomy tube and tried to put in, but that cut end would again rub. So we didn't think that was optimal for the child. Finally, we took a 4-number tracheostomy tube, put the tube in, kept it a little more out. We gave a bigger dressing, thicker dressing so that it remains a little above. We passed our 3.1 flexible endoscope through the 4.0 tracheostomy tube and saw that it was lying just above the narrowing and it was not rubbing anywhere. So this tube we could finally tie around the patient's neck with the straps, and then we could actually maintain the child for a good period of time. Okay, so there's a question, is tracheal stenting an option for this? So in a complete tracheal ring, because it is a total narrowing, there's no option of doing a tracheal stenting in these cases. Some people have, in an emergency, attempted endoscopic splitting of the tracheal rings and some balloon dilatations and stenting, but they are all catastrophic and lead to a negative outcome. So it's actually contraindicated to put a tracheal stent in these cases. So as we moved forward, we were planning to shift the patient on this tracheostomy because we wanted the child to grow a little bit. We wanted her to gain more weight, gain some resistance to fight this syndrome or the infections that they are describing. And we were actually waiting for the report of the genetics to finally decide whether this patient is a good candidate for any surgical correction or not. Then Dr. Tanvi will now describe the reports.
Yes, so thank you, ma'am. That really was very challenging. Even doing the bronchoscopy was challenging because it was so labile. So this is again coming back to the X-ray, which is the current status. And at this point of time, we had got the report of the whole exome and the chromosomal microarray, which were negative. We did not find any syndromic association proved on genetic study or a microarray study. There was no evidence of DiGeorge or SCID. It was commonly a RAG mutation for Omenn syndrome, which also was negative. The challenges that we still face with this child, despite the child being on tracheostomy and requiring high peak pressures, still has occasional desaturation episodes with bradycardia, but hasn't gone to the extent of requiring CPR again since the tracheostomy has been inserted. The high peak pressures also caused a pneumothorax, which resolved within 24 hours with an ICD. Has developed ventilator associated pneumonia with Burkhold area because of prolonged ventilation. Has also undergoing tracheostomy care, as ma'am will elaborate on further. And once she grows a little older, a little more weight, then plan for a tracheoplasty if she is fit at a later date. And an MRI, which is done just to see, look for any hypoxic insult, has shown some volume loss in the cerebral parenchyma, and that is why she is a candidate. And right now we are keeping her stable on ventilator and IV antibiotics. A little bit about congenital tracheal stenosis. It is a narrowing which results from complete or nearly complete rings of tracheal cartilage. The ERS and multiple articles have cited it as 1 in 64,000 incidents. There are 3 types, and the classification used is the Cantrell-Guild classification. Type 1 is generalized hypoplasia, which is the second most common. Type 2 is a funnel type stenosis, and type 3 is a segmental stenosis, which is the most common. Anju ma'am, please do correct me if I am wrong at any point of this.
And which one did our child have of these three?
Segmental
All
stenosis,
three.
right, ma'am?
Which one
The
did our
long
child have? Type
segment.
2.
Looking at the
Acha, the type 3.
Type three.
Acha, the type 3 segmental
Yeah,
stenosis.
type 3 one. Yeah.
So it could be associated with, it would be associated with bronchial stenosis because again the branching pattern during development follows such. And congenital bronchial stenosis is most often associated with heart disease or a part of a genetic syndrome, and usually associated with tracheal stenosis. It is rare to have it isolated. We should always suspect tracheal or bronchial stenosis in cases of persistent or recurrent wheezing, refractory to bronchodilators, a persistent stridor, recurrent LRTIs, or a biphasic stridor starting in infancy. The chest radiograph findings, typically what we can see is hyperinflation. If we're seeing bilateral hyperinflation, we should look for a central airway pathology, and there will be air trapping. Cardiac defects, typical cardiac defects can also be picked up. Tracing the airway on the X-ray is also a clue, and looking for the thymic shadow definitely guides us to look for syndromic associations. A CTPA and 2D echo must be done because they are the most common associations with tracheal ring. This was a very nice algorithm that I came across in an article by Hammerworth. It's an old article from 2013, but it guides us of how to approach a child. So first we go ahead with imaging, CT. If we see a sling, then go for a bronchoscopy, assess the tracheal rings. If there's no cardiac malformation, then we go ahead and we need a multidisciplinary team if required, even a cardiothoracic surgery team to guide the decision making, and the surgery is going ahead. I hand over now to Anju ma'am and Ezzy sir to just guide about routine tracheostomy care and a few snippets about the management of a tracheal ring.
Yeah. So regarding this patient, about track care, and in general, any patient, any pediatric patient who comes to us for tracheostomy, we would want to change the dressings daily, and especially when it is soaked. If we find any evidence of infection, we would send a swab and we'll apply ointment, creams, and steroids to prevent granulation formation. We'll suction regularly, half-hourly on the first day, and then as and when needed. Now, here is an important point that the diameter of the suction that we need to use is important. It's generally calculated as double the size of the tube ID. So if this child has a 4.0 tube, we would like to use an 8 number catheter. 8 French catheter. The length of suction is extremely important in all children, but especially in this case because there's a distal narrowing. We would want the length of the suction cannula to be exactly equal to the length of the tube and adding 2 centimeters of the hub. So in this child, if the length of the tube is 39 millimeters, then we would add 2 centimeters, and it will be 59 millimeters of suction depth, not less and not more. Suction pressure is also pretty defined in the neonatal period, infancy and children, because the tracheal mucosa is fragile and cannot tolerate excess mucosal pressure given by the suction machines. Humidification is extremely important because these patients are not breathing through the natural humidifier, which is the nose. So they need an external humidification in the form of either an HME filter or any kind of wet gauze that is kept over the stoma, which has to be explained correctly to the caregivers. Next slide, please. Next, straps also need to be changed because we just look at the stomal part, but a lot of our children, especially in the Indian situations, have a lot of sweating around the straps. So straps have to be changed at least weekly. Oral care is also important because all these saliva trickles down, and if there are any bacterial infections in the mouth, oral cavity, buccal mucosa, teeth, at all, they will trickle down and cause. That's an increased chance of ventilatory associated pneumonias because of poor oral care. Tube change now. Every tracheostomy needs to be changed. At least the first change has to be on the day 5 or 7 of the tracheostomy. Then every 7 to 15 days. This child we have also maintained that, and we are changing the tube every 7 days for this child because we want to prevent any infections. The silicone tube, which is preferred in pediatric age group, unfortunately, we did not get the right size tube for this child because the length is an issue in this child. But for any other child who would like to use silicone tubes, which have a long shelf life of 5 months, do not need to be changed so frequently. The PVC or the polyvinyl chloride or the plastic type of tube that we usually get lasts for about 4 weeks. So this has to be understood by everyone. Patient and parent education, especially in pediatric population, is extremely important and is part of our routine tracheostomy care. Can you move to the next slide, please? So I'll talk briefly about the about overall management of complete tracheal rings, as in this case. Somebody asked whether these can be managed conservatively. Do they grow? Yes, around 17%, as written in most literature. 17% of patients will have only minor symptoms. The narrowing would not be significant. They will continue to grow like a normal child, and they can be followed up by sizing of the airway, which is done by direct endoscopic examination and passing serial endotracheal tubes to size the airway. We've seen that this serially grow like normal children, like how normal tracheas would grow, around 0.42 millimeters per year. So such patients who are lucky and who do not have associated cardiac anomalies can be managed conservatively. Somehow, these patients, if they don't land up into any problems, can grow like a normal child. However, most of these children, around 80%, would present to the emergency with some kind of crisis after an upper respiratory infection or an intubation attempt. In these cases, if we try to intubate, we have to instruct them that the tube has to lie quite proximal. You can just leave it at just below the vocal cords and try to ventilate. You can maintain them on a non-invasive ventilation as long as possible. And if no tube passes down, then an ECMO is also an option till we prepare such patients for surgery. Now, slide tracheoplasty is the gold standard method for this kind of problems. I'll explain it in the next slide. There are some other methods which have been traditionally tried, like pericardial patch tracheoplasties or cartilage grafting or some endoscopic procedures, but they do not have such good results as compared to slide tracheoplasty. Next slide, please. So slide tracheoplasty is a method in which we are repairing a long narrow segment by cutting it in midline in the midpoint and opening it and then sliding it over each other. So if we can imagine, we are creating a short but wider trachea as seen in the images. So the image B is a complete tracheal ring with the carina seen in image C. In image D, this is a post-op slide tracheoplasty patient where we can see a wider but shorter trachea. So this is the gold standard treatment for these kind of problems. However, in this child, now that the child has undergone so much, we would like to wait for the child to grow up to the age of 6 6 to 7 months, or at least they have at least 8 kgs of weight to tolerate this kind of major intrathoracic tracheal repair on an ECMO. This child is going to have a lot of trouble in the post-op period, will need repeated bronchoscopies to clear the secretions that collect around the suture line. Uh, the post-op period is so traumatic that we would want the child to gain weight, stabilize a little, and then we would think of undergoing a slight tracheoplasty for this case. Next slide.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you to our radiology team, Sonal ma'am, Hiren sir, and of course, Indu ma'am. We charted out the course of this patient exactly as we faced it. So our take-home messages from this is every stridor is not laryngomalacia. It is persistent stridor, not subsiding, biphasic, or in other cases, if children are coming with recurrent or persistent wheeze, not responding to bronchodilators, with an early onset in infancy, with associated with other congenital anomalies, definitely we should look for these airway anomalies also. Work hand in hand with the ENT and the radiology team to diagnose and treat these. CT with angio for vascular slings and a 2D echo must be done because they're the most common associations and can be surgically corrected if they are compressing. They most commonly cause the segmental stenosis. The mainstay of diagnosis is a bronchoscopy now, and even though virtual bronchoscopies can be done, the gold standard remains a direct airway assessment. And Anju ma'am, what Anju ma'am has also said, that if it's a short segment stenosis, generally has good outcomes, but a long segment associated with other cardiac anomalies, other congenital anomalies, have a very tumultuous post-op period and generally a poor prognosis. So with that, I invite any more comments, any more questions, and thank you again for the opportunity to present this case. It was a great learning opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tanvi. Any comments, Dr. Rawat, Dr. Chen?
I have one or two comments. One is that given
Can you stop slide share?
given the fact that the genetics has come negative, what is our working hypothesis on the diagnosis? I mean, do we still feel that this is some variant or some sort of thing that is it possible that it is not picked up, or are we not considering that? I mean, I just wanted to know a little about that.
So I think sometimes your genetics, of course, is a diagnosis which evolves with time. Maybe right now, of course, we have not identified any mutation. Her genetics was done both in Oman and here, so probably two databases have been checked. So maybe she's just like multiple congenital malformations, so airway and cardiac with an ectopic kidney, so which could be polygenic in etiology and may not really have a specific genetic mutation.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why, and one is that reason, and the second reason is the primary hospital from where she has been referred, they want us to go all out. So we have just been with this kid for the last 1 month. So they just don't want to, and especially the MRI was normal, no genetic abnormality. They just want to go all out for the child. So that's how
Yeah, that was my second question, that what is the long-term prognosis, considering she's already been on a tracheostomy for so long? What is her long-term?
I think Dr. Anju will be able to guide, but so far she's okay. If she's holding on, and if we can look at the surgery when she turns 7 kg, then Dr. Anju has to answer that.
Yeah. So the treatment of this condition is essentially surgical. There's no doubt that we have to, if we want the child to come out of this tracheostomy, ultimately the child will need reconstructive surgery. And the criteria for doing these surgeries in most centers is about 6 kgs or 6 to 7 months. So we will have to wait and see, and we will have to see how her neurological status is, whether she grows like a normal child, develops repeated episodes of these desaturations again, then we are looking at a bad prognosis. But if this was only a complete tracheal ring case with no other problems, then this child would have a very good prognosis, and we are still hopeful that she may come out of this because she's been a fighter throughout, as we've been seeing throughout the slides.
Okay, now this tracheoplasty will fix the trachea. What about the multiple narrowings which are there, like her right and left main stem and all of that? Like, how will that is how means
Yeah.
how do we
So as I
assure that
said,
by doing that tracheoplasty, her lungs will still make it with, because there's multifocal narrowing even beyond the trachea, right?
yeah. So it's part of it is that Bernoulli phenomenon that I am talking about. Once we correct the stenotic segment, significant improvement of the distal Malaysia will happen. And
Okay.
that we will take as it comes. It happens with most of our cases that we see when they have an upper stenosis and there's a maleitic segment. When we open this automatically gets corrected. So we are hoping, and as the child grows, there will be some amount of development of the distal airway as well. So we'll do a check scopy. We'll have to do repeated check scopies and see how the child behaves. Maybe the child remains for some more time on a tracheostomy despite the surgery being successful. We may have to keep her on a track and give her some CPAP support for the time being till the child grows. When she's out of all this, then we'll see. I mean, it may take about 2 to 3 years for us to eventually decannulate this child successfully.
Yeah. So
Okay,
in many
nice.
of these congenital malformations, even your congenital CCAMs is a phenomena of bronchial obstruction. So wherever you have an obstruction or decreased air going into the lungs, your distal airways will not develop. So the moment you are opening them, the lung continues to grow in the first 20 years, and more so in the first 2 years of life. So once you remove the obstruction, of course you will need to have care to prevent infection, but the Malaysia definitely can improve. Most of the other bronchomalicias, if not with the tracheal stenosis, over a period of time to get better.
I would like to add one last point which got left incomplete is the immunology reference was also taken to see whether lymphopenia and that was there, which was not significant. So again, not fitting into any syndrome, probably secondary to the stress of the infection.
So maybe the thymus.
In the chat box,
Yeah.
Dr. Indu, in the chat box, Dr. Girish Subramaniam has mentioned one syndrome. Can you just check it out?
I checked it out. It doesn't fit in.
Doesn't fit in that. No? There's something related to consanguinity.
I asked ChatGPT, it didn't give me an answer.
Okay, right. I would request Dr. Rawat to give final comments.
So I think thank you very much. It has been a very, very complex case, and I think the clue was that child presented as laryngomalacia. The strata started at the age of 2 weeks, but then it was atypical that the child during sleep he used to have strata, which was not usual for laryngomalacia, and definitely the child required more evaluation of the airway, which was done very vigorously and very extensively, and I think it has been managed very well. Only one thing is that we couldn't close the case because his genetic testing has been negative, and we cannot really pinpoint. So we'll have to keep our fingers crossed, because with multiple anomalies, how the child is going to behave in the next couple of months with and thymic and his cardiac and his kidney and everything is there. So we cannot have the child having only an airway anomaly. We could have given a good prognosis. But since we are not able to close the case and we don't have a diagnosis in the child, I think we should keep our fingers crossed, like how the child is going to behave in the next couple of weeks. It is only to be seen. And hopefully, if other things they don't come up, and as Dr. Anju is telling, as the child grows and when the airway becomes a bit bigger and they are able to do a good tracheal surgery, I think we can give them hope. But I think we should give them a guarded prognosis. I think this has been a very good learning for all of us, that as the Tanvi is telling, that all strata they are not laryngomalacia, because that is the commonest garden variety diagnosis. We try to make a child who is having strata in early life. So I think it has been a very good learning, very well managed case for Dr. Indu and Dr. Tanvi, and very well. And of course, Dr. Anju has done an excellent job, and Dr. Sonal has done a very excellent work to dissect the entire airway and give us a learning of how things can be abnormal of airway as well as heart. So I think thank you very much, and over to Jayant sir.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Indu. Thank you, Dr. Awad, for those comments. And I think I must say that it's a very complicated case, as I agree with Dr. Awad sir, that even though all the efforts are done by most of the multidisciplinary team who are doing their best to kind of keep this child going on, there are several lacunae which the child has, which probably will have some question mark on the long-term prognosis. But as of now, let us all hope that probably it will go in the surgical route. And as Dr. Anju was mentioning, if we can successfully deal with the tracheal surgery, then probably, as Dr. Indu was mentioning, things should get better for her life. So let's see what happens in the future. I think the child has come through so much of phase, probably carries a good chances as well. So thank you very much. It was a very interesting case. And really thank Dr. Tanvi, Dr. Sonal, Dr. Anju for a valuable comment, Dr. Hiren Panwala, who was not visible, but his comments were very important. And we will meet once again for the next edition of this in the first week of April. And thank you, Dr. Indu, for taking this initiative. And good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you, everyone.
Thank you,
We
sir.
can all
Thank you.
get back to seeing
Dr.
the match
Kasi, thank you.
now.
Yeah.
The nail biting finish. The nail biting finish is left.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Bye
yes.
bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.